What's going on, guys? My name is Embrace the Pace, bringing you guys another video today. And as you guys probably know, the NBA draft lottery went down last night, and it was definitely really interesting because I believe this was the first time in the history of the lottery that we did not have any shakeup. Everything was completely chalk. It went exactly to the odds. The Sixers end up with the number 1 pick. The Lakers keep their pick, and they're going to be picking number 2. And then we have Boston at number 3, Phoenix at number 4, and Minnesota at number 5. And those are the teams that are going to be picking in the top 5 this year. So in this video, I'm just basically going to be going over some of the storylines we can expect as of right now. I'm not going to be going too much into detail. This isn't going to be like a mock draft type of video or a full-on projections video. I did one of those last year at this time, and when I look back at that video, it's so funny because one of the things I like to do is, now that we know everything that happened, I like to go back and look at the projections, from before the draft, just to see how much things changed, and it's actually unbelievable. Like last year, I remember at the time of the draft lottery, things just were completely different by the time the NBA draft rolled around. Obviously, you're going to have so much fluctuation. You got some guys that are late risers, some guys that slide in the draft. You've got to deal with injuries. You've got to deal with a bunch of different types of things that can affect the draft order and what guys the teams draft. So once we get closer to the draft, I'll do more of an in-depth mock draft type of video. But for now, we're just going to talk about some of the main storylines. So as we know, the Sixers have the number 1 pick. To be 100% honest, I wanted them to pick outside of the top 2 because I feel like they really need a lead guard type of player, and I know for a fact that they're not going to pick one of those guys as of right now, and I don't see this changing. Obviously, it could, depending on a lot of different factors, but right now, everyone can agree that the consensus top 2 picks are Brandon Ingram and Ben Simmons. They could swap them back and forth. So Simmons could go number 1, Ingram could go number 1. We don't know that yet. So the Sixers obviously are going to pick one of those 2 guys, which means they're not going to be picking a lead guard type of guy. I really wanted them to pick out of the top 3 or out of the top 2 because I wanted them to snag up like Jamal Murray or Chris Dunn. And I really wanted them to get D'Angelo Russell last year. That's why I was a little bit disappointed when the Lakers went with Russell at number 2. I wanted him to slide to number 3 for the Sixers, just because the Sixers, they've got so many big guys, but they need that lead guard type of guy. So I was a little bit disappointed in that. But overall, this is going to be good for them. The Lakers have a really easy job at number 2. They'll just pick the player that the Sixers do not pick. So if the Sixers go with Ingram, the Lakers are going to go with Simmons and vice versa. But as far as who I think the Sixers should go with as of right now, it's definitely a toss-up. Personally, I think that Simmons is the better prospect. I mean, you don't have too many guys like Ben Simmons that come into the league. I mean, 6'10" with the ability of a point guard minus the ability to shoot. But you just don't see too many guys like that, and he's got the potential to be a full-on superstar, like a transcendent player. But one thing that I do not like about Simmons is the mentality and possibly the character. Now, I don't really want to question his character because obviously I don't know him, but judging by his season at LSU, he was the main guy on the team, and they had some talent on that team with Antonio Blakeney, Tim Quarterman, and some other guys. They had the ability to at least make the NCAA tournament, and he wasn't able to get them there, given that the other guys just didn't really produce, and he did put up really good numbers. I just don't know about that. It's definitely a toss-up. Ingram is a guy that you can fit into a system way better because of his ability to stretch the floor, but Simmons has that just high-end potential that if he developed a jump shot and the whole character mentality thing, really doesn't end up being anything, he could definitely be the type of guy that could end up being a full-on superstar. So it's really a toss-up right there. So after the top 2 picks, it gets interesting, and really the most interesting pick here is Boston at number 3, because Boston, obviously, we know they're a playoff team. They've got a lot of young players that are kind of coming into their own, so they're kind of transitioning from being a young team that's rebuilding, that has a lot of talent, to being a contender. And we obviously know, Isaiah Thomas is a guy who is going to be, he's one of the best players in the league, was an all-star this year. So you're going to have him. I think his contract runs out in 2 years, but you don't really need to worry about that right now. But then you got some other guys like Marcus Smart, Avery Bradley. You've got some talent on that team, and I don't really know where they need to bring in. They don't really need to bring in a guy that's a project necessarily. They could bring in somebody that could help them. Could that be Buddy Hield? I don't know, because their backcourt is a little bit crowded, and I don't know if they necessarily want to reach at him quite that high. A lot of people are saying Dragan Bender, but again, that kind of goes against their that kind of goes against how their roster is. They don't really need to bring in a guy like that who probably will end up being a project. Obviously Porzingis, a lot of people thought Porzingis was going to be a project, and he comes in and really plays well this year. So you never know. Well, that's something we'll have to monitor as we get closer to the draft. But that's a really interesting pick. I don't know what they'll do with that. There's a good possibility they could trade it. I would definitely be looking to trade that pick, and if you got something really nice, I'd jump on it, because you don't necessarily need a player that high, and outside of Simmons and Ingram, I don't know if there's anyone right there that's necessarily worth it for Boston. There's no huge storyline around the Suns pick at number 4. There are a lot of different options they could go with. I think the first one that jumps out to me is Jaylen Brown, because he would fit a need on the wing, and he's got a lot of potential. I think he's a guy that is worthy of a pick that high, or at least worthy of the risk. And then if they didn't want to go with him, they could go with a big man. If Dragan Bender is available, they could go with him. They could stretch and maybe get Henry Ellenson if they like him. There's a lot of different options that they could go with, and we'll just kind of have to wait to see how that plays out. And then number 5, I'm not going to go too much more into detail past number 5. But number 5 is a super interesting pick with Minnesota. And really, all I want to see right now is Chris Dunn to get to number 5 for Minnesota. I think that would be absolutely amazing. I mean, I was talking about this on Twitter the other night. Think about how insane it would be, how insane the Timberwolves core would be with Karl-Anthony Towns, Wiggins, Zach LaVine, and Chris Dunn. Not to mention you also have Rubio. I had some people ask me if you move Rubio. I don't think you really move Rubio if you get Chris Dunn, because Chris Dunn, even though he is the lead point guard type of guy, he's got the size to play the 2 guard. And then also Rubio, I mean, you could play them together. So you could have Rubio at the point and then Chris Dunn at the 2. And then I think LaVine is even more of a 2. So you could put him in there. You could run Rubio with LaVine. You could run Dunn with LaVine. And you could just do a bunch of different things with that. So I don't really necessarily think you need to move Rubio if you were to draft Dunn. But I think that would be a really interesting situation. Chris Dunn is definitely one of my favorite prospects in the draft. He's the type of guy that I think other than Simmons and Ingram, Chris Dunn is number 3 for me. He's a very, very talented prospect, and he just fits. If you watch him play, I don't know if you guys have watched him play too much because he played at Providence and they weren't, on national TV that much. But Chris Dunn is the type of guy when you watch him play that you can just see he is an NBA point guard. He's the prototypical modern day NBA point guard, right up there with guys like Westbrook and Dame Lillard and all those guys, John Wall, a bunch of guys like that. He's the type of guy that could develop into an all-star, and I really have a lot of hopes for him. And I think it would be really fun to see him go to Minnesota. So those are kind of the main top 5 storylines that I'm going with right now. I think it's going to be a really interesting draft. A lot of people talk about this draft being weak. I don't think it's necessarily weak. It just doesn't have a lot of full-on star power other than Ingram and Simmons, and we don't even know how that's going to turn out. I see both of those guys having the most upside and the most potential to end up being a superstar. But other than that, you don't have a lot of star power necessarily, but you have a lot of depth. As I said, Chris Dunn is the closest thing other than Ingram and Simmons to being able to become a superstar, in my opinion. But you have a lot of depth. Once you get late into the first round, you're still going to have some solid players available. And, it really should be an interesting draft. Can't wait. June 23rd is when it's going down. That's another month or so, and I really can't wait for it. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. What did you guys think about the draft lottery? How we had no mix-up at all. Let me know who you would pick at, outside of Ingram and Simmons, or just let me know if you would pick Ingram or Simmons if you were the Sixers. Should be an interesting one. Hope you guys did enjoy the video, and I'll talk to you guys later.